Hi everyone, this is a YOKU belt. But before we talk about this, I want to talk a bit about this because this is a traditional belt. It's made with what's called a frame buckle. And the nature of a frame buckle is that you insert a belt in as you would and you put it through, and to put it on you ratchet it back onto itself so that you can get it onto a suitably tight hole so that it then holds. And the problem with this style of belt, and this is the most common style of belt out there, is that this is what it does to even a high quality piece of leather. And the problem is globally, people aren't making belts with high quality leather, and they're largely making them using some form of cheap metal because it's cheap, and some form of relatively cheap leather. Basically not full grain leather and not top grain leather, which are really the only durable forms of leather to make a belt out of. Now, before I come back to the YOKU belt, I want to talk a little bit about the backstory here, which is about 15 years ago, a girl who worked for me was going to Hong Kong, and on a whim I said, bring me back something nice. And she went to the streets of Hong Kong and she bought a belt with this style of buckle. And this is a dress style buckle, and essentially what it allows you to do is to slide the belt in from underneath and simply using a small hook to hook this thing in here. And what I observed over 15 years of wearing this belt, this is that original belt, is that there is much less wear put onto the belt as a result of this. And really only in the last 5 years, when this belt finally started to degrade, it was cheap metal and relatively inexpensive leather by the looks of it, that I realized I needed to design a new belt. In fact, I wanted to buy a new belt, but I couldn't. And so I couldn't find the belt that I wanted. They were all either poorly made, or they had branding all over them. They were I just didn't like it, and I figured, why wouldn't I try to design my own belt? And the brief was very straightforward. It should be a belt that utilizes this mechanism because, as I've explained and I've observed work myself, if you don't use this mechanism, you actively destroy the belt just by wearing it. And so I wanted it to last a long time, and so this mechanism worked perfectly. The problem with this belt that I bought, like every belt that's like this, is that it wasn't interchangeable. Like if you wanted a black belt, great. If you wanted to have any other color, then that was you were stuck with black. You had to buy another entire belt to make that work. And in a belt like this, the frame and the buckle is typically the most expensive part of the belt. So what I wanted was it to be interchangeable, to be highly durable. And the problem is that interchangeable belts typically involve some form of teeth mechanism to hold onto the leather and some form of reversible leather. Now, if you have reversible leather, what you actually have is two bits of leather bonded together. And even on a relatively expensive belt, this is a Hugo Boss bit of leather here, you've got bonded leather and it actually starts to come apart. This belt is not only a couple of years old, we've actually used this for some of our prototyping, and because it's bonded, it's actually coming apart. So bonding leather and having designs where they involve teeth and moving parts were all off the question. It had to have no moving parts, completely interchangeable, and it had to work with a single strap of full grain leather so that it could be the ultimately durable product. And so we essentially had to start from scratch. We had to start from designing a buckle that would have no moving parts but allow a belt to be interchangeable. And as you've seen from the videos, how we achieved this was we created two B parts, as we call them, that essentially sandwich around this leather strap. They come pre-made. If you want to buy a different color, you just buy one of these. And then this beautiful buckle here that is a single piece of metal. These have been precision cast, but I'll explain a little more about the manufacturing in a minute. And both of these components have a magnet in them, but the magnet actually is just there to guide the pieces into position. What's really doing the work is this thing here called the hook. And what the hook does is it allows, once the magnets to connect, to put the piece exactly where it needs to be. And even though I'm pulling that apart now, that won't come apart. But even more than that, once I slide this into position here and I put this into a hole, as you would expect, this is never coming apart because it has two bits of leather here, and the ability for that tongue to come back through. The forces never operate that way anyway. The hook holds it in place, but it completely stops the thing from ever coming apart. So you get a fully interchangeable belt with no moving parts, nothing to move, nothing to break. And it means that you can coordinate whatever color belt you want with whatever it is that you're trying to do. But this belt, because it has no moving parts and because it's using this hook underneath as opposed to the traditional frame option I set up front, we expect will last decades because it's just not under the same level of stress, and it's using high quality materials, in this case stainless steel and full grain leather. Now, the other interesting thing that happens as a result of this is that if you're using a single piece of material, it means that you can make belts out of other things. And so we've already been experimenting. This is a titanium 3D printed buckle. This is a precision cast silver buckle. Again, it's exactly the same mechanism, exactly the same component. And our concern with making a belt that was beautiful and sustainable and durable and desirable was that only a small percentage of the population would ever be able to afford one. And if our aim ultimately is to take hundreds of millions of belts out of the equation by enabling people to buy one and not having to buy one for another 20 or 30 years, we have to work out how to make them out of more affordable products. Now, 3D printing is getting cheaper every year, so a 3D printed buckle actually might ultimately be the way that we get to scale and the affordable economics. This belt only retails a stainless steel one for 180, so it's not massively uneconomical. And that's for one buckle and two belts. So, that's essentially around the price of an RM Williams belt, if you like, the comparable brand. But once you start using things like plastic, so this is a 3D printed nylon, this should work with recycled plastics as well, you can make these things for a few dollars. And if you can make them for a few dollars, you can make this belt for about $30, even using full grain leather. And it means that you can retail it for $60 or $70, which puts it in price parity with other, inexpensive belts, except that it lasts 10 times as long. Anyway, I hope that helps explain some of the inspiration and the context and the arc of the story of how we got here. I've obviously abridged a huge amount of the detail, but now you have a better understanding of why YOKU exists, why we're focused on building a belt only, and what we ultimately want to do is to inspire people for one less thing, like to buy one thing and not have to buy it again. And if you can start that idea with a belt and wear that every day, maybe you can take that out into the rest of the life and the decisions that you make. Or if you're a designer or in fashion, maybe it can inspire you to do a product in another category with the same ethos. Thank you.